Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to begin the funeral service. Officiating is Rabbi Eitan Allen.
Good afternoon. Thank everyone for their patience. It's a difficult but yet very special honor to be able to help the family give a kavod achron to their dear father, to their dear Zaidi, Rabbi Binyamin Zev ben Arav Baruch, to give a final honor and respect to a very, very special, strong, wonderful, wonderful man. It's always difficult to be at a place where loved ones are. I know his dear wife is buried behind us, Ruth. And for those of us who have just left the days of celebratory time, the Yontif, the Chag, where we're so focused on Simcha, Vayisa Ach Sameach, being happy at the Regel, being happy at Yontif, this is a very drastic change. So for those of us who haven't been at a place of holy ones, at a Beis HaKfaros, at a cemetery, it's customary if we haven't been there for a month to make a bracha. And we'll make the bracha and everyone can answer Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher yotzer eschem badin v'san v'chilkil eschem badin v'hemitz eschem badin v'yodea mispar kulchem badin v'hu asa lachayosem l'kayim eschem badin Baruch atah Adonai mechayei hamesim Atah gibor l'olam Adonai mechayei mesim atah rav lo shia mechalkel chayim b'chesed mechayei mesim b'rachamim rabim Somech noflim v'rofei cholim v'matir atzurim v'mekayem emunaso l'sheinei afar v'yichamocha ba'al gevuros u'midomalach melech v'misr mechaya u'matzmiach Yeshua v'neman atal hachayos mesim. You are trustworthy to revive the dead. It's difficult to often know how to capture our emotions and what to say and when to say it and how to say it. We have a tradition that when we don't know what to say and we don't know what prayers to say and how to say it, we reach out for Tehillim. David HaMelech has always been our conduit to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in times of joy and in times of sadness. Rabbi Binyamin was a lover of davening and a lover of shuls. He was a lifelong lover of shuls. He had an eternal membership in being a daily davener. And so we begin with Kapitel Ach Tehillim, the words of Tehillim, to try to help us capture and find solace. Ashrei ha'ish, asher lo halach bi'atza asur shayim, u'b'derech chatayim lo amad, u'moshev leitzim lo yashav, ki m'toras Adonai chefso, u'toraso yageh yomam v'layla, Vayaka Shasula Palge Mayim Asher Piryo Yitin Beita Valayo Lo Yibol B'chol Asher Yaseh Yatzliach Lochein Harishayim Kim Kamos Asher Titfenu Ruach Lochein Lo Yakumu Rishayim B'mishpat V'chatas B'adas Tzadikim Ki Yodea Adonai Derech Tzadikim V'derech Rishayim Toved. David HaMelech continues Mizmor LeDavid Adonai mi yagor b'alecha, mi yishkon behar kadshecha, holech tamim upal tzedek, v'dover el memes bilvavo, lo ragol al lishono, lo asa l'rehu ra, v'cherpa lo nasa al kirbo, nivze be'enav nim'as, v'es yirei Adonai yichabed, nishba l'arav lo yamir, kaspo lo nasa meneshech, V'shochet al naki lo lakach, osa ela lo yimot leolam. I'd like to call up Jason now to say another kapitel to him. Right here, 23, Mizmor David.
Mizmor David, Adonai ro'i lo efsar, benot eshe yarbiteni, almei menuchos yinahaleni, nafshi yishovev, yanchin b'maglei tzedek, leman shemaho, gam ki elech b'geit samoved, lo irara, ki ata yimadihi, shiftecho mishantecha, hema yinachamuni, ta'aroch lefanai shochan, neged, sorerai, Dishanta b'shemen roshi, kosi rivayaha, ach tov chesed, yirdefuni, kol yimei chayai, v'shavti b'beit Adonai, liorech yamim.
Thank you. As I mentioned before, we just got through a very special Yom Tov, and even though we knew that Binyamin Ben was not doing well and was in the hospital, he had many good days, and so we didn't necessarily see this coming right away. And as we leave that glow of the Yom Tov, we still feel the aura of that Simcha today on Isru Chag. So traditionally, we keep our eulogies a little bit more concise. So there are a number of dear family members that need to say something about their precious father and grandfather, but maybe there'll be more to say, and there is many more things to say at different times, as we'll have time together in family to say things at length. Just to begin the stream of thoughts before we hear from a few of the family members, Binyamin Zev Ben Lebovits was born on October 28th, 1925. This was the 10th day of Cheshvan. His father was a rabbi, and he would tell me about that sometimes, and I can imagine rabbis, they're very busy in the month of Tishrei, and right after Tishrei finishes and all the holidays have finished, to have a baby in the next few days will be quite an undertaking. But I'm sure Ben and his brother brought a lot of joy to the family. He ended up in Torah Vodaas in New York when the family was in New York, and he thrived in the yeshiva. He loved to learn. It was a lifelong passion of his. The Torah was something that he was quite close with for all of his lives in so many permutations. He never thought that he was worthy of any accolades or praise, but he knew so much. He had a tremendous amount of ideas, of knowledge in the Torah, and he had so many svarim that he'd poured over, but yet he wouldn't take honor for it or credit. In those days in Torah Vodaas, he really thrived on the lumdis. For those who know a little bit about learning the yeshivas, when you go back and forth and you go into the pill pool and you really try to break your head over a difficult topic, he loved that back and forth. If he could follow the ins and outs, he was like a kid in a candy store when there was a real good shir going. Eventually he ended up in California, UCLA, got his doctorate, and he and his wife Ruth, eventually they decided to make what I think was probably a brave decision, to go to Chicago and to be at Roosevelt. And he was a staple in the community for so many years, not only in the psychology department, but also just as an advocate for higher education, for children's learning, for helping in all the Jewish schools, trying to push that people should be more knowledgeable, more understanding, and to be an advocate for Jewish causes. When a Jew needed something, when a frum Jew needed something and was trying to progress in his studies, Binyamin was always there. Not with a lot of fanfare, but behind the scenes, orchestrating things. And as I said before, he was a lifelong shulgoer. He was a lifelong person who was devoted to seeing Jewish institutions thrive and to seeing that shuls in particular thrived. He had a special place in his heart for seeing that shuls were good. He was a shul president for close to 3 decades, 25 some odd years. And he was a fixture, seeing everything worked clockwork. And he supported the rabbis and was always very differential to them. And it was just, even in the last many years in Park Plaza, it was a staple that you knew that the men were getting ready to daven if the professor was in his chair. We always called him professor. And I don't know why he didn't want doctor as much as professor. And if he was ready to daven, you knew the men were getting going. He had this twinkle in his eye, and you knew he was at home, whether it was a shir, or it was one of his books, or it was davening. He was a happy man. And the goodness that he felt and that he talked about, and all the things that he learned, and all the things that he prayed so fervently for his children and his family, it radiated through it. Not everybody in life merits to have a countenance that sparkles. Rabbi Binyamin sparkled. He had a hadras panim. He had a beautiful face. He had a face that when he smiled, he lit up the room. He had a beauty because he lived a life of grace. He lived a life connected to holy things, Dvarim Kedoshim. And it was really a remarkable privilege to be part of that and to have a small piece of knowing him and being close to him. I think amongst his most beautiful pieces, and I think the things he was clearly the most proud of, were his wonderful children. I think Yehuda was one of the first people I met when I came to Chicago. Yehuda and Andrea, Ellie, Rachel, Ariel, all the kids that have come now. He was overjoyed with the new babies. Marnin and Nasia that have come so many times for Shabbosim and Yom Tovim. And he would be so shepping when he knew that you were coming, and you could sit with him at davening or a shir and be together, and just all the connections. And although I didn't have so many chance to see all the payros from your family, just to see Yisrael Meir here today, Baruch Nisim, and so much more, the family growing and thriving. When we would talk about a new simcha, he would always light up. Shirah, and I remember when Ellie came for Pesach, and all those warmth it gave him, how much it was a pleasure to have family around. Freda, you were his rock. You were always there for him, week in and week out. Whenever he needed things, whenever he needed something picked up, you would always get it. You would just spend time with him. Not appointments, not rushing, just to be there, to be this beautiful relationship of mother and daughter. And it was so impressive to see. You would be there for her so much. I told you, some people said, she doesn't live in Park Plaza. I said, no, she just comes to visit her father because she loves him so much. You know, and it was a beautiful thing to see how much he loved you and you loved him and how much you gave him. And of course, he never stopped thinking of Alida and what a loss that was, and to the wonderful family that she left. I remember, it must have been a few weeks ago, because we were in the Yomim Tovim time and the holidays, so you can't say the memorial prayer on a holiday. So he came to me one day, maybe it was Shabbos Shubah or something in between time, and he said, I have 8 kalmalis to make, because I have all these relatives that I'm thinking about, that I'm worrying about, that I want to memorialize them. And that was something that was always on his heart. He thought intensely about family. He thought intensely about those he loved. He worried about them, he davened for them, and he was so proud of each and every one of you and all the ones that are watching and not here. And it was such a pleasure to see how much nachas he had from the family. There's much to say, but there are many people that would like to say things. But I'll just end quickly saying that we suffered a great loss when we lost Rabbi Binyamin, and he gave us so much, and what a wonderful and special loss, what a wonderful and special life. The Medrash tells us at the end that when we left the last holiday of Sukkot and Shmini Atzeres, Hashem didn't want to leave us. Hashem couldn't leave us, so he said, give me another day of Shmini Atzeres. Kashe elai predaschem. It's hard to leave. I want one more day. And I think somebody as special, as righteous as Rabbi Binyamin was, Hashem finally said, even leaving Yantif, it's too much. I need you closer to me. I need you closer to me now. And although it's hard for us, he's in a very special place. Teinish Masud Tzrura, B'Tzrura Chayim. Family should only have Nechama. I think we're going to start with the grandchildren. Yeah. No, you want to do it first? Up to you. Okay, so let's start with Rabbi Yehuda, one of his dear sons.
Baruch Dayan Emes, Hashem blessed Zadie, or as my grandchild would call him, Big Zadie, with a long and meaningful life. The fact that Hashem chose Isru Chag, the end of Sukkot, in my opinion, is no coincidence. Zaidi made sure I was with him in the hospital over Yom Tov, and he made sure that he was nifter after Yom Tov, so as to not affect or interfere with the Simchas of Simchas Torah. I was with him. He was fully aware it was Simchas Torah, and I do believe that in his request, Hashem made sure that he would be nifter after the Chag. I also suspect that Zaidi knew that, as the Rabbi Allen just said, that there's an abridged haspedim on Isru Chag, on the day after a Chag, so the day after a Yom Tov. And in his humbleness, I know he would not feel comfortable with lengthy eulogies, and certainly even if there wasn't that requirement of an abridged hesped, to try to span and explain the life of someone who, in my opinion, was so great, would take volumes in a lot longer period of time. Zaidi's passing on Sukkot has a special meaning. Sukkot represents the complete trust in Hashem. Bnei Yisrael the Jews proceeded to go into the desert with very little food and no protection whatsoever from the elements. The only thing they went with was the complete trust in Hashem, in God, that he would protect them and provide for them. Zaidi lived his entire life in complete trust of Hashem. The Ushbis and the guests that we invite to our sukkah represents individuals who possess the best midos, the best characteristic traits: humbleness, kindness, compassion, sweetness, strength, knowledge. Zaidi had all of these collective midos. A few examples: humbleness. Zaidi, throughout all the years, always refused any public recognition, though he assisted all the schools in the 1960s and early 70s, being on their education, assisting with their education and their processes for establishing education. He was very much an advocate of both Limudei Kodesh and Limudei Chol. We all grew up, all my siblings grew up with our father, Zaidi, telling us how he was a cook in World War II, and his prized specialty was cooking potatoes. It was only years after I was already married and that I actually heard from my mother that really was never true. In fact, he had many medals. He was never a cook, but that's how he presented himself. Kindness and sweetness. He's always greeted everyone, and he's always treated everyone as a very important person. And my fondest memories growing up were as we would head downtown. That's where he was a professor at Roosevelt University. I would go and we would travel by the CTA, and this was again in the mid-60s, late 1960s. He would greet the bus driver every morning, and every morning the bus driver would smile and say, "You have a good day, Professor." When we would get to Roosevelt University, he'd always be the first one there in the morning. The custodian was there, and as soon as he walked in, my father would greet him as soon as my father walked in, and the custodian would look back and say, "Doc, you teach your classes well today. I hope your students are respectful." Zaidi had a Shem Tov. He really had a stellar reputation, which is something that was extremely important to him, as a Talmud Chacham, a professor, a brilliant one at that, and a simple mensch. I just received an email from our in-laws which succinctly describes Zaidi. It saved me a couple of moments on the way here, and I don't think I would have done as much justice. So I'm going to read very briefly what he sent me. Dear Yehuda, so sorry to hear of the passing of your father, Zechron Levracha. We don't often meet people who truly succeeded to fully embrace Torah life and values with derech eretz, the way of the land, the secular life. I will remember your father as an individual who shined in his ability to excel in both, and one who combined the two without compromising any one of them. Your father leaves a big gap in the family and the community, but he leaves behind a wonderful legacy to you, your children, and grandchildren. He will be greatly missed. On Tuesday, this past Tuesday, I was in the hospital with Zadie, and we were reminiscing, we were laughing, we were talking about years ago, we were talking about what was going on currently, and to him, the most important thing and what always brought a smile on his face and lifted him up was as we were talking about his grandchildren and great-grandchildren. That was really, and his family was the pride and joy. Last, I'd just like to thank Rabbi Allen. I'd like to thank Park Plaza. That has been his home for a number of years. He has loved going to Minyan there. He has loved going to all the shiurim that they offer and all the programs that he's enjoyed there and the friends that he's made. I'd like to thank Hatzalah for the many times that they have escorted him and taken him to the hospital. I'd like to thank Chicago Jewish Funerals for the Herculean efforts that they did to make sure he passed last night and to make sure that we could have this Levaya today in such short notice. And I'd like to thank the Chicago Mitzvah campaign for hosting us at their hospitality suites the many times that my father was in the hospital and to allow us to stay over Shabbos and Yontif. And lastly, I'd like to thank Rod, who's been an amazing caregiver for my father, a companion, someone who he has grown to love and trust, and we appreciate everything that you did.
As I said, there are so many wonderful aspects. Thank you so much, Yehuda. There's so many wonderful aspects, and I know during the Shiva we'll have time to flush them all out. But as I said, one of the prides and joy of his life, and you just can never get enough good things about them, was wonderful children, grandchildren, and even great-grandchildren. So I'd like to have Rachel come say something on behalf of, the granddaughters and the rest of the grandchildren.
So we've heard a lot about what a caring and invested our Zadie was, and it just cannot be overstated. He really took such an interest in all of his grandchildren and his great-grandchildren, and there could be no question that we were all his pride and joy. I remember very fondly when I was young, Zadie was always very interested. What are you learning in school? What sefer are you learning? When I was in elementary school, first, second, third grade, and he would say, what are you learning about this? What are you learning about that? And then he would go to Rosenblum's, and he would come back and he would say, oh, you said you're learning Sefer Bereshis? Well, here, look what I found. There's a new sefer came out and I want you to have it. And it was just, the thought and the care that went into that. He was always thinking about all of us. I remember coming often when I was younger to my Bubby and Zadie's house, and every time we would come and visit, we would always enjoy laughing and spending time with them. And then when it was time to leave, I have a very distinct memory. Every time we left, and Yisrael Meir is doing it now, Zadie would wave at the window. He would watch us pull away.
Till you hit the highway.
Till you hit the highway. He would just, he wanted to see you out. He was just, he just enjoyed being with all of us so much. And it was palpable. And it was just a love that I think all of us felt so deeply. And as we've all grown up, his interest in all of us and his investment in all of our lives has not wavered at all. Anytime I would speak with Zadie, he would not only ask me questions about what I was up to and what my family was up to. For example, when he found out that I was going to go to law school, and then when I was in law school and graduating from law school, he would always know somehow all of the cases in the Supreme Court, what was going on. He said, did you see what was in the Times? Did you see what was in the Tribune? It was like, before I had a phone call, I knew I had to kind of get my bearings on current events and what was going on in the legal world. And he would do the same thing when my husband was in YU. He would call him up and say, well, I saw, there's always something going on in YU. And he would say, oh, I saw that this Rebbe is coming and this Rebbe is going and what's going on with this. He knew it all. He read every blog. He read every newspaper. And he was really interested in getting to know us and what was going on in our lives. And he would also tell me about my cousins, you know, who's learning where and who's living where. And he was always just had so much pride in speaking about his family. It was just so touching, and still is. That even has continued with my own children, which living on the East Coast, he's only met them, I mean, a handful of times. But every time we speak with him, he would ask us, you know, what grade are they in? What are they learning? What are they up to? And then it must have been maybe two or so years ago, he was asking what my kids were up to and what they were learning in school. And he said, you know, they just came out with and I said, I had a 6-year-old son at the time, and he said, who's now 8, so not that much older, but he said, oh, Avi, he's in 1st grade. Well, they just came out with an illustrated sitter, and I saw it in Rosenblum's, and the next thing I know, there's a package of Sfarim at my door for my kids, which is, you know, again, it's an unbelievable thing. Not too many people into their 80s and 90s. I think he had a blog with his political analyses. It's you don't meet people like that. It was only a couple years ago where Zadie would tell me that he was calling up the Clinton campaign and giving them, you know, the psychological perspective of what they were doing wrong. But in all seriousness, I mean, to echo what's been said, he was so rooted in Torah. He was so rooted in the current events, what's going on in the world, education. These are all things that were so important to him, and I think he instilled in all of us. So I guess, you know, although he was 95 and going on 96, up until very recently, you could have these types of conversations with him. And it's just, you know, we're all going to remember that, and it's something we're going to be thinking about and talking about for a very long time. With that.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Again, there's so much to say. I want to ask for Yisrael Meir to say some stuff about few words about his special Zadie.
Rachel, you took my whole speech. You took everything I was going to say. No. I just want to mention, it's Isru Chag, the day after Yom Tov Sab. I just want to mention a couple of points. We all are, in different ways, shapes or forms, carrying on, bearing the legacy of Zadie, that was Zadie. And this, I just want to mention a couple of points that I noticed. And although Zadie is no longer here, but his legacy lives on, and it's up to us to perpetuate that legacy, carrying on those things that Zadie held so near and dear. That's our work, that's our goal, that's our job, to bring pride to that Lebovits name. Those that remember, Dr. Lebovits, he's your grandfather, he taught me in Roosevelt, and whatever, fill in the blank with whatever, anything good that a person can say, and it's up to us to carry that on. So I just want to mention 7 points, short points. The first is that although Zadie had much that he could have tooted his own horn about, but he just viewed it as, oh, I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do. And when you do what you're supposed to do, you don't deserve accolades. Like he just, that's what you do. That's the right thing. that he could have won a Guinness Book of World Records for coming to Shachris, a millionaire. If you would have mentioned it to him, he wouldn't have even been impressed. Like, oh, okay, of course. You get up in the morning, you go to Shachris. If you don't get up in the morning, then you don't go to Shachris. You don't go to Daven. Something that our sages tell us is very telling is what people say. Their knee-jerk reaction about a person is very telling. And just ask anyone in the community, in the Chicago community, what they have to say about Zaidi, and you'll hear praise after praise after praise. And the Gemara says that's a very impressive thing. One's good name is the only thing that one has to stand on. A third point about Zaidi is that if you would praise or bring something to his attention, he would like push it aside. And our sages tell us that that's the hallmark of a person who is deserving in the world to come. Someone who's quiet, he doesn't make noise. Zaidi came every day to Shul. There were others who didn't come every day but made a lot more noise than him. And he was there every single day. And he just did what he was supposed to do. He was quiet, without fanfare, doing what he was supposed to do. And I want to comment on something that Rabbi Allen said, which is that he specifically identified as a professor, not as a doctor. A doctor, someone who has a doctorate, not a medical doctor, is someone who has knowledge but doesn't impart that wisdom. Zaidi was all about sharing whatever he had, whether it was knowledge, whether it was money, whether it was the shirt off his back, whatever he had, he would give to someone else. And that included imparting the knowledge and wisdom that he had gained through his years. And then there are two last points that are just memories that, to me, bring a smile, and I think to everyone here they will as well. Who can forget Zaidi's canvas sukkah, right? That it took 3 of us to schlep out the canvas, and like you would turn to Zaidi, Zaidi, do you think maybe, it's time to get a new sukkah? This is like a very old, no, this is sukkahs. This is what sukkahs is, the bench, the bench that's seen better days. It was like masking taped up with a bunch of plastic tablecloths over it. And that was sukkahs. That was the special feel of sukkahs. And to Zaidi, that brought a special smile on his face. And it was just like the pine schach on the sukkah, on the top of the sukkah, the canvas, heavy walls. That was part of it as well. And then the last and final thing is, I don't know if any of the other grandchildren remember this, but Motzei Pesach, the day after Pesach, in all homes is you have to bring everything back. Bring back out the chametz things. Zaidi had a special science for doing it, and it involved numerous boxes all tied with string. And the whole downstairs by that fridge that was downstairs in the basement was covered with those boxes. And so one time I turned to Zaidi and I said, Zaidi, do you still need 25 dishes? A set service for 25 for Pesach in Milchiks, in Fleishiks, and in Parim. Do you still need to bring that out every year? He says, yeah, of course. This is Pesach. You bring out all the dishes, you put it back. He's not cooking for so many people. There's not so many people at home. No, that's a Pesach. There was a joy, and it came natural. It came naturally. There's a joy. As everyone else shared, the pride in family, the familiar pride, and something that nothing could make Zaidi happier than his children, his grandchildren, and now his great-grandchildren. And that's something special and something we can take with us. These different ideas, viewing our job in this world as something that's what's expected. Sometimes the accolades aren't coming, and we do it nonetheless. Being concerned with what people say, that we should interact with others in a positive way, not make noise about ourselves. Whatever we have to share with others, be it knowledge, be it in our what we have to give to others, looking for ways to share with others. I mean, I'm sure Rabbi Allen could tell us this, but he always had these ideas how to help those around him as they're going to the next stage of their lives. And sometimes people have this tendency, and who better than Zaidi to identify it, that people sometimes grow bitter with what they have or haven't done with their lives. And he wanted people to be joyous, people to celebrate. Okay, so I can't run as fast as I once could, he once told me. He said, and I'm schlepping along. He said, but I can enjoy whatever I still can. Let me enjoy it to its fullest. And that's something that we can all take a lesson from. Tehei nishmasa tzarur b'tzar hachayim, and his memory should be a blessing to all of us.
We're now going to proceed with the Kvura before the Kaddish. Ask those who are going to shovel to come close. What? Craig? Okay. Down. As we're lowering down, we ask public mechila for anything that ourselves, Mishpacha, any of those who loved him, done. We didn't show him proper kavod while he was alive. You know, anything we did, we tried to do out of love. We ask him for us. we're going to begin with the shovel, of course, upside down. And those who are finished with the shovel, we put it back in the dirt. Come forward who are able to help. Before we sit down in there, before we lift the garments, we wash them. Everything happens at the right time. We shouldn't fuss, so we look at our shirt and then we shower after. Yeah. But only the parents, you wish everything were right. Andrew, I'm going to get your cover again. What's the close and then we're going to make this lesson. Okay, so anyways, I'm going to start this one with you. I'll do something. Yeah, hold it. Just lift down. Yeah, I'll be right part. Okay, I'll hold this, you hold out. See it? It's pretty similar. It's short. I love Unless you don't want it. Sure. Anybody who would continue to like to help in the Kfura is welcome to help. If not, please just stay put. No, it's fine. I just wanted to clarify by the way. When I was talking about spending pizza with my cousin, it was Ellie was there for a while and there was also Elle. Also fun, so I hope it was clear. I got to meet him and enjoyed him. I see how much he enjoyed his evening. We'll go back. Sit here. Sit here. Sit down. So many things that were out of print except for them. It's close. Lower a little bit more, or should I? That's very good. Yeah. Part of the cover that took him in last week to the hospital? You on that call? Can't say. Okay, because today is still Isru Chag and we're still coming down from the high of Yontif, there is no Kel Maleh, but we will say a final kapitel Tehillim before the mourner's Kaddish. Yoshei b'Seisir Elyon b'Tshel Shaddai Yislo Nano Mar Ladonai Machsi U'Mitzudasi Elohai Eftach Bo Ki Hu Yatzilcha Mipach Yakush Midever Afos Behever Aso Yosech Lach V'Sachas Kanafov Techse Tzina V'Zochera Amito Lo Sivra Mipach Adlai Lo Mechetz Yof Yomam Midever B'Yafo Yahaloch Miketev Yisod Saharayim Ipo Mitzidcha Elech Urvavo Mimnecha Elecha Lo Yigos Rak Beinecha Sabid V'Shilmas V'Shoyim Tireh Ki Ato Adlai Machsi Elyon Sam Jamunecha Lo Suna Elecha Ra V'Nega Lo Yikra Bo Halecha Ki Malacha V'Tzav Eloch L'Shmarcha B'Chol Derachecha Al Kapayim Yisa'uncha Pendigof Be'evan Raglecha Al Shacha V'Fesan Tidroch Tirmos Kefir V'Stanin Kivi Chashacha Foteo Askaveu Ki Yada Shmi Yikra'eni Ve'aneyu Imo Anochi B'Tzara Achal Tzeo Ve'achabdehu Orech Yamim Asbiyehu V'areyu B'Shuasi Orech Yamim Asbiyehu V'areyu B'Shuasi. We now ask the children to recite Mourner's Kaddish.
V'chayechanu v'yamechanu v'chayetach al beis Yisrael Agalav izlan kariv v'imru amen
Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevorach V'olam Amei Amaya
Yisvarach v'yishtabach v'yishpahar v'yisramam v'yisnasei v'yisadar v'yisalel v'yisalol Shmei kedusha b'richu Le'elom yikol chasa v'shirasa Tuch v'chasa v'nechemasa Damiran v'yalama v'imru amen Yehei shalom v'rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu Hakol Yisrael v'imru amen Yaseh shalom b'mrama V'yaseh shalom aleinu Hakol Yisrael v'imru amen.
We want to thank all the members of Chicago Jewish Funeral and Simcha and everybody else in this crew. And as well, all the people from Shalom. Shiva will be this week at Park Plaza. What that department is. Shiva will be private. The information is on the website. Phone numbers available. We thank everyone for being together. And may Reb Binyamin's memory continue to be a blessing. We say to Reb Binyamin, Lech b'shalom, should go in peace. V'sanuach b'shalom, you should rest in peace. V'tsamo l'gor alech l'ketz hayamim, you should arise at the end of days, your time.
If we can have the extended family and friends form an aisleway leading away from the grave, so the immediate mourners could walk through, and we could offer them the traditional words of condolences. So please form an aisleway straight this way.